Hello and welcome once again to Virtual Vision FM, your platform to all things spiritual. We're going to get right to business today. I'm going to welcome Nina Ashby, my lovely co-host over in London. Welcome, Nina. How are you doing today?
Oh, really, really well. So happy to see you, Era. And hello, everybody who's joining us not only today in our chat room, but also in our archive recordings when you actually get a chance to listen to ourselves and our wonderful guests for this evening. And I personally know we're going to be very inspired because we have a very, very talented and just lovely person here with us today in the form of Raymond Castrogiovanni. So we're not going to bring him in just yet. I thought that I'd like to just share a little about what's been going on in my world, and one of the very interesting things is the pattern that's been arising with a lot of the clients that I have. They're very, very interested in speaking to their loved ones in spirit. Now, as you may or may not know, I do on occasion speak to those on the other side, and I have been known as a medium, but it's not the primary aspect of my work. But when I go out and work in the public, I just sort of kind of go along with what people want based on the different divination skills that I have. So, for instance, I could give people an aura reading, or I might work with cards, or might just do pure clairvoyance, which is my ability to attune myself to people's energies and then be a mirror to that through my own sensations and energy that I pick up from people mentally, visually, emotionally, and sensation-wise. But recently, over the past week or so, with all the planetary activity, which of course we'll be talking about a little later with Ray, who happens to be an astrologer, all of a sudden everybody wants mediumship reading. And that's really unusual for me. So I have to sit there and say, well, if they want to come in, that's fine. But I've been getting really, really strong connections with people, and it's been really amazing. So I think that because of Mercury retrograde, Saturn changing sign, the big eclipse that we had last week, and the new eclipse that's coming up next week, there's this real push for people to kind of go into themselves, and the theme of communication and looking backwards and looking into oneself is very much a theme. What do you think, Era?
Actually, I have been finding the same thing. And firstly, what I want to comment on is the fact that, yes, the mediumship is definitely there for you. And if it happens, it happens, which is always lovely. But I think, too, that with this energy shift that we've been going through of late, it's really changing the work that we do. And more avenues are opening up. And the ones that are existing right now are actually being amplified some way. I just found that the work that I'm doing has taken on a totally, not a different twist, but more depth. It's really mind-boggling, really. And when it comes to clients, what I can say is that so many bookings I've had, and this started maybe 3 weeks ago and has accelerated a little bit more and more every week, where people are actually coming for this end, for me, to really establish and get reconnected with that innate power. Everybody wants to go within right now, and I couldn't be happier, because that's the whole thing about the work, right? Is to
That's right.
reintroduce people to the power that they already are, demystify the mystical bunk, and really bring things back to basics and have people that are. This is their core. And now it's time for them to find their answers a little more quickly and a little more clearly than they have done in the past. So whatever is working for us right now as those who are in service, I think the client as well is at a place where now they can get that clarity, have it more quickly, and really start to get the glimmer of seeing things for themselves, which is really an exciting time. And yeah, I couldn't agree more. It's just been a very interesting few weeks, and I like you, believe it has something to do with it, but the astrological alignments that are at play right now are pretty powerful. Now, they don't, to me, nothing is written in stone. Everything is quite fluid. It's all about potentials. And we can take those potentials and run with them in a very positive way, or we can get very fearful and run them into the ground, right? So
That's right.
what we think, therefore we create. So it's really very interesting. And so I'm excited today to speak to our guest, Ray Castrogiovanni, multi-talented, multifaceted energy. I like him already. I have only spoken to him briefly before we went to air, but there's something there, and I think everyone is going to benefit from his wisdom today. Lots of insight is going to be shared. Nina?
Yes. Absolutely. Now, let me just preface this by saying that I first met Ray when we worked together on Psychic Today TV in England. And this was, I think, in 2008, I first started working with him. And so I've known him for a little while and have always been incredibly impressed with his accuracy and his knowledge, his wisdom, but most of all, his warmth and approachability. He's just such a lovely character, and a real character in the best sense of the word. So I'd like to invite Ray onto the show now. So show yourself, and hello.
Hello. Yes, it's lovely to be with you, Nina, and listening to both yourself and your colleague, Nina, Era speaking, I beg your pardon.
That's okay.
I'm blushing a little now, but thank you very much anyway. And it's a pleasure to join you. And this, of course, is the first time for me on this particular format, so I'm very pleased to be here.
Well, we're pleased to have you. And let's start off by just asking you a little bit about, how you got into the position of being a professional psychic, because, I know that in our day and age, it wasn't something that you started out thinking, that's what I want to be when I grow up. So where did you begin? And we're really interested in your story.
Okay, it's quite a long story, so I will sort of abridge it a little for you. But I was always interested in the spiritual, and I always challenged the mainstream religion that I was brought into. I come from, as you can tell from my name, an Anglo-Sicilian family. So I was brought up as a Catholic, and as a child, if you would ever visit the seaside, I didn't really want to go on the rides. I always wanted to go and visit the ladies in the booths that would have crystal ball and do the palmistry. So it was something that fascinated me, and also this belief that was coming in from other places as well. And as I grew from a child into a youth and then a young man, I explored a great deal. However, it really goes back to when I was 8 years of age, and it was Good Friday, and I had gone out with one of my sisters to go and buy some chocolate from a shop, and I ran across the road and I was hit by a car, and it was at exactly 3 o'clock in the afternoon, and I had a fractured skull, all the ribs were fractured pelvis, broken leg. So everything on the left side was broken. And I was completely unconscious and been operated on, and didn't come round until 3 days had passed. So it was Easter Sunday when I was back in the world again, for want of a better expression. Of course, coming from a very strong Catholic family, they sort of read more into it than I did. But what was interesting was it took me away from mainstream religion and wanted me to sort of explore all spirituality and all faith. And as a teenager, I had a girlfriend that was really interested in Wicca, and she gave me my first set of tarot cards, which is the Sheridan deck of cards. So I had them from being 17 years of age. And when I was 21, a lady from Southport Pleasure Beach had one of these booths in the fun fair, and she sort of advertised for an apprentice on the local television. And so I turned up, and between her and her husband, they became my teachers, my mentors. And from that point onwards, I got to understand about palmistry, astrology. So my approach to spirituality is very holistic. But what was interesting, and these were the strangest couple that were my mentors. She came from a Jewish family, and he came from an Islamic family. And they sort of had this wonderful relationship where they loved each other to bits, but struggled with all the family members and so on. I left the family business and started travelling around the country doing mind, body and soul events. So that's how I ended up changing my life. So I stopped being a restaurateur and became, I struggle with the word psychic, but obviously that's how people understand that's how I work. So I tend to call myself an astrologer because it's an easier word to use. But within a consultation, it is very much about looking at somebody's date of birth as a starting point, and then everything else falls in. And I use lots and lots of different disciplines and tools to help me understand what's happening and what's around an individual. So it's very much an holistic approach to looking at fate, to looking at destiny, and seeing how an individual's free will can work. So that's how I ended up working the way that I do.
That's really interesting. I didn't. I think I probably have heard the accident story before, but I didn't recall it. It wasn't, and so that was fascinating how you had that experience and kind of came back and your life has changed.
And of course, one of the things about that, which I didn't understand as a child, and it was only later in life that I understood it, and of course, it was an out-of-body experience. And from that point, I can't say that I understood that it was psychic energy, but I just knew things. And one of the things that, and of course this didn't seem strange to me, but I was stood beside myself as I was lay on the ground as the car sped off, and then the next instant I'm stood next to an ambulance attendant putting me into the ambulance, and then the next thing I'm in the operating theatre. So I kept jumping, almost like sort of time jumps into different parts, but I was detached from myself completely. Now, I as a child assumed that was a dream, and I accepted most of my young life that was a dream. It was only as I understood spirituality that it wasn't a dream at all. It was that I had, and perhaps it was the survival thing that happens. We leave our body when we're in crisis.
Indeed. Very powerful experience, very powerful. And interesting that, when one is a child, one accepts those things or frames them in ways that are
It didn't seem
kind of as natural. Right. Yeah. But did you tell anybody? Did you remember talking about it?
Not at all. It was, I think, because that happened in 1963. It was Easter of 1963. And that was a very interesting year for me. The whole of 63 was an extraordinary year. But I didn't talk to anybody about it because it was actually just dealing with just coping with life. What I didn't realise had happened as well, it did impact on my ability to learn academically. So I left school without the ability to read or write properly.
Really?
Yeah, I went back to education in my 20s, and when I was 19, the big thing was everybody was reading The Hobbit and The Lord of the Rings, and I was sort of out of the loop. So I forced myself, it took me a year to read The Lord of the Rings, and then I decided from that point onward I would sort of re-educate myself completely. And I used to mask it. For instance, again, when I had my sort of first bank account, so that I could write out a cheque, I had a friend of mine write in all the figures as they would be written out in the back of the chequebook so I could write out a cheque. And one of the great things was when I got my first book published, to go and to the bookshop, a great big bookshop in Liverpool, and see my book next to Castandetta and Quello. So I was sort of in the same section as them, and of course because my surname begins with C, I was next to them in the books as well. So that was a real thrill. So going from an inability to read and write properly. So yes, I didn't realise the absence of that. So I think I was just focusing on sort of healing the physical rather than the spiritual as a child. So I didn't talk about my thoughts. And of course, I come from a small town in the northwest of England, in Lancashire, where men are men, and you don't talk about your emotions. So I've always been a bit strange.
Well, thank God for that. So let's talk a little bit of astrology. I mean, was astrology the first thing that you studied, or was it palmistry, or was it just sort of just a hodgepodge of things?
It was the tarot initially, and I was introduced. As I said, I got this very first deck, which was the Sheridan deck, and I was 17 when I was very interested in all things spiritual and what we would today call part of the holistic and spiritual way. But in those days, it was called New Age. Back in the 70s, we called it New Age.
That's right.
And so I was interested in everything, but I was given this set of cards, and the book that came along with it, which is out of print these days, but I still see it as the most definitive work on the tarot, was for me, was interesting because I couldn't really read it very easily at the age of 17. So I was sort of working with intuition with the cards. It took me a long time to actually read the book. So I was working with intuition. And then, once I mastered the ability to read properly, I got Parker's Practical Astrology. And what was fascinating, when I began to understand astrology and I looked at my own birth chart, I was so mortified. I realised that when you study astrology, which is about your own natal chart, your own birth chart, it's really about who you are, and it's full of contradictions. So everybody's birth chart is the same insofar as it tells you where you come from, who you are, and what your journey is. And when I read mine, I recognised all the negatives, and I've used astrology to improve who I am. And I do that today when I'm doing reading. So astrology is kind of like the all-encompassing of everything else that I work with. And I think it's interesting, I heard you talking about mediumship earlier, and for me, it's a bit like crossing the Rubicon when it comes to mediumship. I've spent a lot of time sort of going to spiritual demonstrations, spiritual churches, and I've found that it's not me. But when I'm doing a reading, I know that the information gets channeled and it comes in. But it's not that sort of clear voice that I look for. I think that's where I see that as the people who work with mediumship so easily I'm in absolute admiration of them. And it's the one area that I struggle with, but everything else I work with. And so astrology comes like, there's this holistic approach, so I work very much with the tarot cards. Palmistry is a big thing for me as well. And I think that's because it's tactile. Palmistry for me is almost like a kind of psychometry. You're holding somebody's hand. There becomes that sort of intimacy just by holding someone's hand. And that can be so important within a reading because you know yourself sometimes if you're in the middle of a consultation, somebody may turn up and they just may want to just look at how events are going to unfold, and it might be about their working life or it might be a business thing in some way. But then we occasionally come across people who have been through terrible, terrible heartache. And just that sort of touch and working from the hand, it sort of has an amazing release of emotion, amazing release of all the energies. So I think that's a wonderful part of that. But of course, since probably 1978, I've become very, very aware of angels and realised that they're amongst us. And of course, there was that wonderful Nicolas Cage film, City of Angels. But I managed to see the original version, the German version with Peter Falk, which is set in Berlin. So it's the same film, it's just presented in a different way. And on the Brandenburg Gate, we have all these angels stood watching over humanity as they walk around. Now, for me, whenever I've met or encountered angels, they've always been very human and very flawed. And there's a wonderful passage, and I forget, so I'm misquoting where this comes from, but it says, "Always be kind and tolerant of strangers, for they may be angels."
That's from the Bible, actually.
Is it really? There you go. And yeah.
But I can't tell you chapter and verse where it's from.
No, that's fair enough. That's fair enough. So yes, but in astrology it becomes a starting point always within a reading for me, because I will look at the ephemeris, I'll look at somebody's date of birth and just see how that feels for them. But my approach to astrology is more like psychic astrology rather than. I try not to get bogged down by the purity of astrology. Some astrologers will work that way, but I like it to use it as understanding who we are as individuals.
Great. Okay. Well, now I wanted to question you on sort of your take on all the planetary activity that's going on at the moment before we move on to some other subjects.
Yes, of course. Well, just looking at the position of the planets at the moment and the sky as it stands at the moment, and we have, of course, a very interesting sort of, if we were to look at the way the chart is presented, we set it in a wheel, and the ascendant is always at 9 o'clock if we think of it as a clock face.
Mm-hmm.
But what's really interesting about looking at all the relationships, and that's the lines we draw between the planets, what constellations they're in and what houses they're in, and we draw these lines, and we tend to use red, blue and green lines to sort of make the relationships. But just at the moment, the current sky looks like layers upon layers upon layers of pyramids, just the way that the lines are connecting with each other. So it's creating lots of trines, and these trines are happening so that it sort of builds it up in layers. So it's like this three-dimensional moving pyramid energy in the sky at the moment. And the thing that excites me, and I'm always pleased about the planet Jupiter. Jupiter is the ruler of Sagittarius, but traditionally the ruler of Pisces. And Pisces, because it's the 12th sign of the zodiac, so it sort of exists in the 12th house, is to do with our mind, and it's to do with our soul, and it's that sort of connection between the mind, body, and soul that Pisces is very much about. So even though it's ruled today by Neptune, it's originally covered by Jupiter, which is joy, expansion, all possibilities. How interesting that the colour for Jupiter is purple. And so often people love to use, when dealing with spiritual things, the colour purple. So Jupiter just happens to be in Virgo, the most feminine of all the houses of the zodiac, and which is opposite to Pisces. And it's this wonderful sort of, even though it's deeply feminine and it's very practical, but it just happens to be ruled by Mercury, and Mercury, of course, is travelling retrograde at the moment. And just to sort of, I'm sure everybody that's tuning in has heard the term retrograde before, but it's a kind of a misnomer, except it makes sense to astrologers, because as we look at the night sky, it seems as if the planets are travelling backwards, and it's to do with progression. It's to do with the fact that the position between the Sun, the Earth, and those individual planets look as if the Earth has moved in front of them, so they look as if they're travelling backwards, and that's called retrograde. So when it's retrograde, things seem not to be as straightforward or more difficult. And so we've got Jupiter, which is all about happiness and joy and expansion, in a constellation that is ruled by Mercury, and Mercury's retrograde at the moment. So, I must admit, I've suffered a little bit with this retrograde Mercury over the last couple of days. There has been misunderstanding, miscommunication. Yes, in fact, my iPad died as soon as Mercury went retrograde. So and I tend to say, oh no, let's not get too bogged down by it. But these things do happen. So I always think of it as a time of belt and braces. Just do the extra, put the extra effort in to try and make it come right and try and make it work as well as possible. Now, there are other things happening in the sky at the moment, and one of the things that's good for all of us in the constellation of Leo, and Leo, because it's a fire sign, because it's a fixed astrological quality, it has Venus and Mars. Now, they're not conjunct anymore, but they have been conjunct, but Venus was retrograde and now it's direct. But the relationship, when you put Venus and Mars together, if you have Venus or Mars strong in your birth chart, what's going to happen is, and especially with the Mercury retrograde at the moment, and Jupiter being in Virgo, it's going to heighten all the passions around us. It's going to heighten all those emotions around us. So we might sort of be a little bit too quick-tempered, or we might be oversensitive. So this is the thing about astrology. If you know who you are, it allows you to deal with situations as they unfold in a more calm way, if we can achieve it. And I sort of often sort of preach trying to be calm and trying to be tolerant and so on. But I did find myself losing my temper a little bit earlier today. And I had to sort of bite my tongue and not let it come out. And I knew it was the impact that was around me. But as a younger man, and I didn't sort of understand that so well, I often let the negatives overwhelm me. So I think that's the good thing about astrology. It allows us to know ourselves, a bit like the oracle at Delphi, stating, before you entered, inquire, know thyself. So I think that's why, for me, astrology is so important. And I can add to that a little bit as well, and talk about some other aspects that are going on. We recently had a solar eclipse.
Yes.
And when we get to the 28th of this month, we're going to have a lunar eclipse. And those are sort of very interesting aspects. And we have more lunar eclipse than we do have solar eclipse. But lunar eclipses, for me, are very important. Most people today are becoming more mindful and tapping in about mindfulness and using that mindful energy as much as possible.
Mm-hmm.
So what I believe is that if you can take the sort of positive energy of aspects astrologically, And you can make that mindfulness work all the better. So when the moon is either new or it's eclipsed, it is a great time to not be selfish, but to focus on the self.
Yes.
And to, from your heart, allow yourself to focus on what it is that you can do to make your life better. And then in turn, if you do that in an altruistic way, so that it's giving to others as much as it is as taking it for yourself, then the world becomes a better place to live. And I think one of the great things about the energy of the moon is when the moon is eclipsed and when the moon is new, we can also have this sort of energy of great giving from the heart completely. And I know we tend to think of the sun is all about the heart, but the moon is the feminine reflection of that. And the feminine reflection is important in all of us. And again, I'm going to go off on a tangent here, but the star sign of Cancer, which is ruled by the moon, is absolutely wonderful generally for women. But men who are born under the sign of Cancer sometimes struggle with it. If they can't reconcile that balance of yin and yang, or the polarity of the positive and the negative, they can become sort of trying to be too macho. So it's about sort of understanding that that's why that's going on, and then being at peace with yourself. And I know I'm sort of generalising astrologically there, but it's a good thing to know. And so if somebody behaves badly, we only see them behaving badly. We don't know what's behind it. So we need sometimes to sort of, again, be mindful and thoughtful about the way that people are behaving. So that's my little take on what's going on in the sky at the moment, and trying to give a bit of understanding.
Well, you know, it's really brought a lot to the table, and now I can understand a little bit more what is going on when we are in an eclipse season, which we definitely are right now.
Yes.
Myself, on a personal level, I have really had the need the past 3 weeks just to completely isolate and just be quiet within myself and just allow things to come out and just flow through me. And it's been rather startling, it's been rather exciting, but it's not something that I do easily, but yet this last 3 weeks, everything is just, you know, it's just the way it is, and I'm going with that flow, and it's making all the difference in the world. We're not through with the eclipse season yet, though, are we, Ray? There's still coming. Now,
yes.
Yeah.
And I think the important thing is that we have, people tend to think eclipses happen very, very rarely. I'm talking about the solar eclipse now.
Right.
Because we only talk about them when we can see a full, total eclipse, so the totality when it creates that wonderful corona. And we tend to think those are the only eclipses. But they're constantly happening. But sometimes they're not visible to land, or they're just out of view, or they happen when there is no when the sun isn't out, so through the hours of darkness, so people don't see them. And it's really interesting that eclipses have an impact on us that is much greater than we realise. Yes, in a spiritual sense, but also it connects us to the universe. And when we think about the Earth, and we think about our part on the Earth, and how small we are, and then we think about how small the Earth is against the Sun, and then how small the Sun is against other suns in the galaxy, and then we know that there are hundreds of millions of galaxies out there, we become really tiny, except we're not. Even though, in a physical sense, we are tiny, in a spiritual sense, in an intellectual sense, we are enormous. And we are, and one of the things that I almost sort of went into there was, but I will mention it, is there is a song, and the lyric of the song is, we are stardust, we are golden, and we've got to get ourselves back to the garden. Now, the point is, that was poetry when it was written. But in reality, we've now discovered it's true, because everything that is alive here on the earth came to us via some violent explosion in the cosmos, and some comet went sailing past the earth, and some dust fell, and it helped create the life that we are. And the interesting thing is, every element there is on this earth has come from out there, not just in our solar system, not just in our galaxy, but in the vastness of the universes. And what's interesting is, it's quite possible that there isn't just one universe. There may be multiple universes out there, but we're still not small. We are enormous, because we can think, and we can have talks about what the physical world is, but what the spiritual world is as well.
So is that like saying we're huge because we can evolve consciously?
Absolutely. And you know, one of the things that you know, people are now talking about these missions to Mars. I wonder if we don't actually use spaceships to do that. I wonder if we evolve enough spiritually, and when I say that, I mean so that the whole of our the whole earth becomes connected in a sense with soul, with the soul of the earth and the soul of everybody, that we don't fight with each other anymore, and we love each other fully, then I believe our thoughts, we can travel through the universe simply. And I think that is the reality of how it will happen, rather than it being a mechanical method that takes us there.
You know, I totally agree with you, Ray, simply because to me it always has seemed rather barbaric to go to these faraway places, even the Pluto excursion, you know, to take pictures, etc. That, you know, takes so many years, when really, to me, time is bent, energy is, and so it's a matter of morphing, you know, morphing, and that's how we get from point A to point B. I think the large craft that we spend billions on to fly out there is for naught. I don't understand that, when that kind of money could be spent more into understanding how energy can be morphed. And so, yeah, I just, it boggles my mind.
What's really interesting is the country Costa Rica, in the world of happiness, it scores higher consistently over the last 5 years, more so than any other country. And Costa Rica has no army. And nobody's bothering invading it. They've left it alone. They make their cigars. Okay, I'm not going to smoke a cigar, but it is the happiest place to live, the best quality of life you can have, and they have no armies.
Yeah, so how does that work? I mean, really, come on.
All we have to do is decide we all want to be like Costa Rica. It used to be true of Bhutan, and you know, it's this thing. It isn't just a Buddhist idea, but we think of it as a Buddhist idea. Is that what we possess possesses us? But that is the word of every spiritual leader. Is not to be avaricious and not to want to possess everything. But we struggle with that because we live in a world where we need to use the system that the world works by. So it's bit by bit we will change, bit by bit we will evolve. And we'll get to a point when the whole of the world, everybody sees everybody as brother and sister. And we'll get to that point. And animals are all, you know, treated well.
Yes, definitely. And you know, I've said that over and over again. Just that we need to evolve our consciousness to a point where we're not having to reincarnate with victims and victimizers
Yes,
to learn through. It's a matter of just reincarnating in love, by love, through love, for love, and allowing things to unfold in that direction, right?
absolutely. And you know, one day we'll get there. I may not see it in my lifetime. I pray and I hope that my children or grandchildren see it in their lifetime.
Yeah.
But then again, I've always been an optimist.
Well, I am too, and so
Good.
we can travel the path together, Ray, because it's
Yes.
essential, and we should be teaching our children the how vital it is, and what a pivotal time. I mean, right now everything is shifting, and we have the opportunity to do things differently. And when I look at children and I see that they are this beautiful, pure energy that knows no fear, and yet what we give them is our cynicism, what we give
Mhm.
them is our hatred and anger and frustrations. And that's only going to unfold in that direction. So it's time now for us all to do something just totally differently and try to help this evolutionary curve that we're on accelerate to a point where we're all benefiting. And yes, it might take another 1,000 or 2 years, but it's still going to happen, right? So,
I sincerely believe it and hope so. And I kind of have this dream that it's something that is possible. And the great thing about being spiritual or spiritually sensitive is this belief that yes, we have our physical body, but our physical body is also the vessel for our soul, and our soul will continue. And you know, it's interesting. You talked about to reincarnate, and you know, perhaps those many journeys, those many lives that we have, it takes us a long time to learn lessons, and perhaps some of us are a little bit dim-witted at learning those lessons, and we come back and repeat them. But the hope is that eventually we all sort of get to the point where we all graduate from what has gone on in the history of mankind.
right. Now, in your astrology, I understand how wonderfully well it would work on an individual level for
Mhm.
people who want to come and see you and have you cast a chart and let them learn and understand the influences that are at play in their life.
Yes.
But what about on a global level? Are you able to see trends or um, coming coming opportunities for certain events to take place? Do you ever see anything of that nature?
That certainly is a branch of astrology. It's not a branch of astrology that I work with, but some astrologers do work with that a great deal. And for instance, everything that happens in in an astrological sense, when we put it to the energy of the earth,
Mhm.
the conclusions come out of ancient text. And what I mean by that is we go back to ancient Mesopotamia and the area that is now known as Iraq and Iran, where the Euphrates runs. There is an enormous amount of ziggurats there that were built 4,500 years BC. So these astrologers were observing the sky and they noted everything. So modern day astrologers have all that information. So when we look at global events, what tends to be the way that we interpret astrology in that sense, and it's not something that I do, but I know that it's a particular branch of astrology,
Mhm.
is that astrologers will look at what's going on in the sky, and they tend to do it over quite big periods of time, over blocks of decades, and look at the relationships about when there were similar patterns in the sky in the past. And there's something about astrology. For instance, when we look at horoscopes and we look at astrology as a personal astrology, we base it on the calculations that go back 2,000 years. So, for instance, when we talk about the position of the planets now, what an astrologer talks about is slightly different to what an astronomer will talk about. Nonetheless, it still works and it still makes sense. But to come back to your question, yes, by looking at the past, we are able to reasonably, and this is important, reasonably predict the trends of events that will unfold. But there is another element, and this is the interesting one, which brings it back to time. Because the universe is expanding, and so because our view of the universe over millennia changes, what we have is a view that still is a trend rather than absolute. So, for instance, a lot of the things that are happening with climate at the moment weren't understood by meteorologists 30 years ago, but are now. But astrologers were talking about the way that some of these unusual events are happening at the moment, and they are influenced by what goes on in the sky. For instance, a solar storm will impact on how things unfold and how things happen here on the Earth. So that when a solar flare hits directly the northern or southern hemisphere, the aurora lights up. But we know that when that happens, that it's going to be followed by some issues in a physical sense. So the jet stream may shift. There may be a movement in the tectonic plates. So we have flooding and we have tsunamis and so on, which have always happened. They're just more predictable now than they've ever been. But this is something astrologers have talked about for a long time, but now meteorologists can do it. So yes, it does work in that sense. For other areas, when we talk about how it impacts on people's lives, whether there will be crisis in the world, again, that is something that astrologers look at. But I think what tends to happen is we're aware that certain circumstances will fall, but we don't know how people will behave. So yes, that's the problem of being exact with personal situations. We can talk about the impact on the Earth, but when it comes to man-made problems, that's more difficult to predict.
Mm-hmm. Well, you know, I think that is only the fair thing for it to be, because otherwise it would be usurping everyone's free will.
Absolutely.
Right? Yes. So, you know, identify the trends and understand the possibilities, and really possibilities are ever present, and it all depends on our conduct and our ability to love or fear. That really kind of drives the bus, right? But the stars and the planets can actually introduce to us, into our awareness, the possibilities of what is building energetically just by planets transiting and moving around. I think it's absolutely fascinating, and I'm so glad you're here today because I'm learning so much.
Thank you very much. Yes, it's a real pleasure. I don't often get the chance to sort of think outside the box, you know, because you're asking me about things that I'm aware of but don't use every day, so it's nice to do that.
Oh, well, I'm glad. I'm glad that you're enjoying that. I didn't mean to bring you outside.
That's absolutely super.
But you know, I have to say here and now, Ray, that we are experiencing a little bit of Mercury in retrograde today. We have been working madly behind the scenes since the show went to air to try and get our chat room running. We have people in the chat room, but no one is able to actually type. So everyone who is listening live, we know you're there. There's so many of you there, and I know that you all have questions. So maybe what we can do is, if you are friends with either Ted or myself or Nina or Ray, then email on Facebook your question, and we will hopefully be able to pick it up and ask for you. I don't
Yeah,
want to
put it
miss.
on the Facebook page.
Yeah,
Write it on our Facebook page, and we will pick it up.
exactly. So we don't want you to miss out on this extraordinary opportunity to speak directly with Ray and ask him your questions. Nina, this has been fascinating. I know you've been scurrying in the
I
background.
have, and I've scurrying around trying to get my friend. Actually, I connected with a friend in the States, and she gave me a question and her date of birth, so I will ask that. And I heard all kinds of interesting things about cosmos there, and I love that. It's always a
Yeah,
good opportunity to talk about the connectiveness of all things and the illusion of physicality, but the
exactly.
limitations of physicality.
Hmm.
So, Ray, where have you gone to? Don't leave us.
Come back.
Sorry, I'm back with you. Sorry about that. I do apologize. See, Mercury teased me. I had a little message pop up saying turn off camera, but that may have not been you, so I do apologise. There's the Mercury gremlins, and I sort of have this vision of the Mercury gremlins being very, very small and quite spiky.
Well, I'd like to take this opportunity to welcome Ted to the show. He did make it
Yes.
onto the platform. He has been in the chat room helping us sort out or trying to sort out the issues. We haven't been successful, but thank you very much, Ted. We appreciate your help.
I'm here. Good evening, everybody. I've been listening to a bit of the show, and yeah, it's good to hear it, but it's really weird with the chat room tonight, so I don't know what's going on there. I think what Ray has done is gone over his icon at the top where it then says turn camera off. So if you care to go back over your icon, it'll say turn camera on.
Right,
Yeah,
thank
he's
you.
back on air. You're gone now, Ted. Nice demo there, Ted.
Behave. I know what I did. I just...
Yeah, you just did it.
I'm such a pro, aren't I? Anyway, good evening. And so far, it's been as I came into the chat and saw Ray, it's like gold, sunshine, really cheery, positive atmosphere, despite our difficulties. But it's probably, as you ladies and probably Ray say, it's something to do with Mercury being in retrograde. A lot of... I'm very echoey, am I? All right, let's turn the volume down.
You
All
know,
gone
that's
to
good
top
enough
It's
thing.
good to be here. Good to be here.
Blame Mercury in retro. That's all right. So
That's
we've
what
been
I say.
discussing the astrology aspect of your work, Ray, but there is so much more to what you do. I'm absolutely fascinated because in the beginning, at the top of the hour, I did say that you are multifaceted, and I'm hard pressed to even come up with something that you don't do. So, it is astrology. And the psychic business is also very intriguing as well. Now, I know that Nina and I were discussing earlier before we introduced you that, and I meant to say this to Nina, that I loved what you had to say about how you get the information. It is your entire body that is actually the conduit. So you do get information through the five senses and through the sixth one as well, right?
Yes.
So how does it work for you, Ray?
That's very interesting, and I'm one of those individuals that sort of, it's just evolved this way, that when I'm sat with somebody, it's almost as if I'm plugged in, or if I'm working, or somebody presents me with something they need. It could be a simple question, it could be a complex question. It just changes. And the best way I can describe it is it's a kind of knowing, rather than it being something solid and concrete. So, because of that, and because there's a part of me that is enormously practical and down to earth, I try to make it as tangible as I can. So this is where I've evolved with working with lots of different disciplines. So, and when I first started to understand and work with, for instance, the tarot, what I realised is that everything that is in the tarot is a part of everything else that is spiritual, and the journey of the major arcana from the zero fool card, which could represent all of us, because in that moment of we're making a decision, we're going to flip a coin to find out whether we go left or right, forward or backward. So we're all like the fool at that point when we're decision making. The magician is when we're taking in information that's around us, and that information comes in many ways. So when I'm working with an individual or trying to find the answer to a question, the cards to me are like a lexicon. So each card stands on its own and has a value, has an energy, has a whole layer upon layer upon layer of stories that bring it to where it is. But within the setting of a spread, it kind of almost has to work like spelling. So I think of the minor arcana as the consonants and the major arcana as the vowels. And so that when we work, and then there's another layer going on, there's the sort of artistic energy within it. And we'll take, for instance, one of my favourite cards, the High Priestess. And she's depicted many different ways in many different decks. But she's very often sat holding a scroll, and the scroll will have the Torah as its title. But she's sat in front of a drape of pomegranates, and pomegranates are the only fruits that we eat all the seeds, or one of the very few fruits that we just eat the seeds. And then they're a symbol of the seeds of wisdom, the seeds of knowledge, but it also talks about the High Priestess perhaps being Persephone and escaping from Hades. But to survive for that year in Hades, she ate pomegranates, so she has to return every year. So there's another layer there. But she's sat in between two pillars. One is black and one is white. And there's the letter B and the letter J, which represent the architects and the builders of Solomon's temple, Boaz and Jachin. So all these layers are within just one card. And above her head there is a moon, and both a crescent and a full moon. And her robes tend to be white and blue, which is the purity of spirit. So there's so much going on. When we look at a card, it can mean so many things in different situations, and yet it stands on its own as well. So I like to look at the card. And when I'm working with somebody, and I tend to stick to, for the purpose of me, something that I call a horoscope spread. So I lay them out in the zodiac and work that way after someone has handled them. Which brings me back to when we talked about palmistry, the touch, the human touch. And when I first started studying and understanding palmistry, I was very lucky because my master of palmistry came from Lahore. And so it's the Indian version of palmistry, because he was born in Lahore when Lahore was still part of India, before it was part of Pakistan. And their approach to palmistry is absolutely wonderful and gentle. But what I realised, all the terminology in palmistry is the same as astrology, the same as the tarot. So all these different methods of divination connect in the same way. For instance, in our hand, the areas of the hand are split up not just into lines, but mounts and planes. And they all have astrological names, like the Mount of Venus, or the Mount of Jupiter, or the plane of Mars. So we have all these terms, and they do have that association. And the hands are split up into elements. So there is earth, fire, and water hands. So again, we have all of them converging. So I think that's why I use them all these holistic approaches. It evolved. Maybe it chose me, or maybe I was searching and I'm still searching.
Well, you know,
it would be lovely to see your face, Ray. Can we have your camera on, please?
Right.
His camera's on.
My camera's on, yeah.
His
See, there's
camera's
Mercury again. Yeah.
Oh, okay. I don't know why it wasn't. Okay, good.
Yeah, I'm dancing.
Yeah. So we do have a question for you, Ray, and this is going to be directed to you as a numerologist.
Oh, super.
Okay.
Yeah.
It's from Liz, and
Thank
she
you.
says, I'm in the process of moving, My new house number is 883. What can Ray tell me about that?
Thank you so much. What's interesting is the number contains 8 twice and a 3. And when we put that together in numerology, because numerology is taking the whole number and reducing it to one number. And in this case, the one number is a 1, which means it becomes an Aries number. However, it's more complicated than that. It has Mars and Pluto twice within this number, and it has Mercury, because the 8 is associated to Scorpio, and Scorpio is ruled by both Pluto and Mars traditionally, but is also influenced by the planetoid Chiron. And because Pluto is known, and this is the scientific term for Pluto, as a dwarf planet, it sort of its impact is, yes, an irregular orbit. But when we put the whole thing together, Mars dominates, Pluto and also Chiron are involved in there, but the 3 is linked to Mercury. Now, the interesting thing is that if you take this property, you're moving into an energy that has a 1 as its numerology. They become houses that you stay in for a long time, a home for a long time to come. Because there are 2 8s in there is a double Scorpio influence as well. So you can sort of incorporate some feng shui things in with the numerology of this. And I'll explain the colours associated to Scorpio and to Aries and to the Mercury energy, the 3, is the colour red. Now, I'm not suggesting you paint every wall red, but you use red as soft furnishings here and there, and you use it very subtly. So that's one thing you can take. It would be lovely to know Liz's full date of birth, but when we don't have that, just from the point of view, the energy within your name, you call yourself Liz rather than Elizabeth, and so the Liz has a wonderful dimension, because what it does is it creates 3 letters, and they're powerful. And lots of us do that. You know, I refer to myself as Ray rather than anything else. But because there is in the centre, in between the L and the Z, there is the I, which is the 1. So living in a 1 energy house, known as Liz, and thinking about using sparingly. You see, red is a powerful colour, don't use it too much. If you take this property, using red here and there is very powerful for a successful, happy, long home, a place to stay for a long time. I hope that's been some help, Liz.
Wow. All right, Liz, you can Facebook me and let me know how you feel about that, and I'll pass it on to Ray. Thank you so much for asking the question. I never realized, Ray, that there was so much that went in to the answer like that. Like, you covered so many different modalities just in that one answer. That was pretty incredible.
Well, as well as I sort of have a couple of books out on past life regression, but I also did a book with a television program called Housebusters, which was an astrological feng shui approach. And what I've realised is that if you can put the right harmony with the numbers, then you create a very good place to live.
Okay. Now, I have heard from Liz, and her birth date is July 31st, 1965. She also says that she loves the color red, and she uses it already in her home.
Fantastic. So she doesn't have to buy new things. That's a bonus. So let's have a look at what your birthday creates. And what we have in here is 2, 3. Oh, not only are you born on the sign of Leo, your numerology is 5, which is also Leo. So it makes you a double Leo, a double 5 energy, which is fire. Because of your birthday, the colours that vibrate with you are the colours of the sun. So if we think about this, the sun, when it rises in the morning, is red before it becomes golden, before it becomes bright yellow, before it turns to orange, before it goes to red again. So red is very powerful for you. Liz, but also as a Leo, and the year that you're born in is quite magical too. Because if I think about you are a healer because you're born in the Chinese year of the snake, and that particular year, the element is wood, so you're a fire energy doubled up, but with a core of wood, which makes you, and being a snake is this wonderful healing energy as well. And by the way, the Chinese believe that all people born in the year of the snake are aesthetic. That means everybody likes them. So you should be able to create and generate good friendships. And if we'll add to this, if you move into a house that has the number 1, which is an Aries house, it's another fire energy, so it harmonizes with you quite beautifully. And remember that the year that you were born in was wood. So again, trying to use as many natural materials in your home as possible. It's not always easy to do that because, in the modern world there's a lot of veneers, there's a lot of plastics, but sort of working with the energy of that as much as possible. And one interesting thing you should have in your home is amber as a Leo. And amber, which is quite abundant in the Baltics, used to be thought of by the Norse, the Viking people, as little bits of sunshine that had fallen into the earth. So a little bit of amber for you would be very good.
That sounds lovely. Okay, Liz, I hope that has been helpful to you. It's been fascinating as far as I can tell. it's really piqued my interest here. Let me know on Facebook, and I will pass your thoughts along to Ray. Thank you so much. Nina, you have someone that you have a birth date there? Your mic isn't turned on, Nina.
Yes. Okay. I have a friend, Megan, and her birthday is the 8th of July, 1967. And she's had a very difficult 2 years, or 2 to 4 years. And she needs and wants to start her own business and has several ideas, but is unsure about which one to do, and wonders if you can just give her some insight into her situation at the moment.
Yes, of course. Megan, thank you very much for giving me your birthday there. And of course, born in the sign of Cancer, and your numerology is 9, which is the most reflective number. If we think about the way that numbers work, the 9 times table just reflects itself. So if you have a numerology of 9, 9 is astrologically associated to Sagittarius because it's the 9th sign of the zodiac. It's also the most reflective number. It's the last of the unit numbers. And we do have in numerology an exception to the rule, so sometimes a 2 can be an 11, and sometimes a 4 a 22, but we tend not to use the compounds beyond that. But the 9 allows you to fit into almost any situation. So it's interesting, you're sort of scouting around, you're looking around for the different possibilities at the moment. As a Cancerian, I understand why the struggles have been there. And I'll add to that, you're born in the Chinese year of the sheep. It's sometimes called the goat or the ram. This year, it is referred to as the year of the goat. This is the most auspicious year of the goat we've had for a long time. So you don't get the benefits straight away. It begins to build up as we go through the autumn and we get into the winter where you're concerned. I'm going to also look at the element associated. Even though we look at you as a water sign, you have a numerology of 9 linked to Sagittarius for the planet Jupiter as well as the moon. But the year you were born in was the year of the sheep, but fire. But we're calling it the goat this year. Now, we'll pull that together and say to you, you need to follow your heart and try not to think too much when it comes to what you want to do from a business point of view. But as a Cancerian with an numerology 9, you may naturally the world's best counsellor. There is a high percentage of Cancerians that will do work that is about improving other people's lives, empowering other people. Nines are very good tutors, teachers, facilitators. So combining both of those qualities into a business would work very well. And when I talk about business for you, we have to remember the core of you, we describe you as kind. And in the business world, it is difficult to get the balance between kindness and productivity. But if you can do it in an ethical way, absolutely wonderful and fantastic. And I believe that you will. And I believe that what's been missing, you already know what you're going to do. You already know what really fulfills you. And you may have dismissed it, but it will come back. And my feeling is that when the sun goes into another water sign in November, the inspiration is there. And that may be further away than you want it to be, but bear with it. And by the time the sun moves from Scorpio into Sagittarius, which is your numerology number, then you have more control than you've had for the last 5 years, not just 4 years. And you're able to manifest and create. What I want you to do, and especially if we go to the energy of the 28th of this month, when we've got the full moon and the lunar eclipse, is on that day, in your heart, just believe absolutely that you deserve everything that you're focusing on, and I'm sure you'll achieve it. Thank you so much.
That's really interesting. Thank you so much for that, Ray.
That sounds rather encouraging.
Yes, because she's had a very hard time. Anyway, she's also going to write back to me. She's texting, so
Okay.
I'd like her feedback. If you're here listening, Megan, and also if you can give us Stella's question, that would be good. So I'll wait when that happens. So while we're waiting for that feedback, I'd like you to discuss a little bit about another talent that you have, in addition to what you've been demonstrating. So, and this always interested me, and when we've worked together in the past, is that I know how much you love music. And how oftentimes I've been very impressed by when you've given a live psychic reading on air, that you actually use song lyrics to, during the course of your reading, you get it as information that's relevant to a person's situation. So could you talk a little bit about that, please?
Well, yes. I mean, the interesting thing is I'm completely tone deaf and cannot reproduce a song at all. Yet my father was an opera singer, and he used to supplement his income when he first came to the UK. He was working in the mines, in the coal mines, and to earn a few extra bob, he and my uncle would go around the pub singing Mario Lanza songs, and they'd have a few bob thrown into the hat. My eldest son is a musician and an artist, and his band has been quite successful. They've had 3 albums out, and one of them got into the top 20. So, you know, he's doing very well. And yet I can't reproduce a single note myself. I can drum a little, but that's about it. But I love music, and I can recognise, I just hear a few notes or a couple of chords, and I know what the song is. But what tends to happen is when I'm working, and I think it goes back to, it must have been the mid-70s, and I was travelling around a lot of mind, body and soul events, and there was a particular lady that I did a lot of work with, and she was very kind to me and very helpful. And she was known as the singing psychic, and she was a lot more mature than myself. And so a lot of her songs were not really my cup of tea. But nonetheless, I think something from her I absorbed. So very often when I'm working, there will be the title of a song or lyrics from a song will just come to me, and I will give them back to an individual as part of the reading. And you know, what was interesting is that at first when I was doing it, people were just sort of looking at me a little bit strangely and thinking, he's away with the fairies. But then people started to come back and say, actually, that was a very important song to my dad or my auntie or whoever. So there was a spiritual link through the song. And I think that's what it kind of came from. And then sometimes when I'm sort of working, especially in the media like this, where I haven't got somebody sat in front of me, it's a question coming through on a screen, or somebody like yourself presenting is relating the question, and it somehow is that extra link that is made between myself and the person that comes out in music. But I do have a great love for music, and I love to dance, and it's just interesting. I was one of my granddaughters. It's her birthday in the week, so as a treat, she came to stay over last night. We went to the cinema this morning, and then I drove her back home this afternoon, and we passed a banner on the roadside, which was about a soul and Motown night. I thought, I've got to go, because I'm one of these strange people that loves soul music, blues, but also heavy rock. And I love Dusty Springfield and Tom Jones, and you know, one of my favourite singers is Matt Monro. So
Fabulous.
there are all sorts of musics that I enjoy. There's nothing that I would say that I don't like.
Mm-hmm.
I have to admit, I sometimes struggle with trad jazz, but apart from that, I love everything.
I'm with you, Ray.
Me too. I have really eclectic taste in music as well. It all has some kind of different rhythms that we can relate to within ourselves, and not only the lyrics and the meaning of the lyrics, but the emotion and the beat is very important, isn't it?
Absolutely, yes.
I like how there's always a song associated with specific events in our lives and specific people.
Yes.
You can't get away from that. I'll hear a song, you know, from years ago, and I'll think, oh, that reminds me of, right? So it really is a huge part of our life.
Absolutely. And I came across the works of Hildegard of Bingen, or Bergen,
Yes.
and her Canticles of Ecstasy are very interesting, because in the 80s there was this movement of dance music, which isn't my cup of tea, but people would go to places like Ibiza, and they would dance to exhaustion, and it was you know, it was called ecstasy. And what was interesting was this 12th century nun, when she wrote these, it's the same circadian rhythms as this dance music that they used in Ibiza in the 80s. And the idea was they would sing and chant to a point of exhaustion that would create ecstasy. And that's how the visions came in. And what's really interesting is it happens around the world. Native American eagle dance, the beating of the drum, dancing for hours on end, creating exhaustion and ecstasy. Mongolian throat singing, the same thing, singing and singing, this beautiful sort of sound that comes from the throat. And it's all linked. So wherever you go in the world, you find this amazing music that sort of somehow touches the core of us. And we're very lucky. We've been born in a time when pop music came alive. So as a child, I used to go to bed with a radio and try and tune into the crackly Radio Luxembourg, which was the only one that played pop music. And so that was one of the great pleasures of my life, just listening to that crackling music. But it does come out in readings now, and it's kind of, perhaps it was always there, despite being tone deaf. Maybe I'm sort of spiritually alert, even though I'm physically not able to reproduce it.
Yeah.
So I never sing.
Well, I've got Megan has responded, and she said thank you so much. That was lovely. But she's asking I mean, what is your take on 3 different types of career that she's thinking about? One is doing readings.
Yes.
One is writing a screenplay. And what's the other thing? A blog. A blog, like a food blog, because she's been a holistic chef for a lot of years, but there's a lot of things I know about her, but just those 3 things. So she can't do it all, but she needs to think about making money in the end.
Of course. I think I would argue that, Megan, you can do it all. However, let's break it down into bite-sized pieces. First of all, a Cancerian, and not just being a food blogger, but somebody who is a chef. Now, it's interesting. Some years ago, I did a television program with James Martin, who's a Saturday morning cookery program on the BBC. He's a Cancerian. There's a lot of very successful chefs born under the sign of Cancer, so you're going to be good at doing that. The screenplay will come eventually. Don't make that the focus today. I don't want to do that. I don't want to say that to you, because I don't want you to be put off doing that, because you are going to do it. But the bite-sized pieces is, when we talk about psychic readings, I would say more than psychic readings, you're an innate counsellor. So I think in your psychic readings, you will help so many people and get the right remuneration for it. So I think that's your starting point now. And by the time we get to November, you feel really comfortable in that role. You feel really strong in that role. And you'll realise that you've got some extra energy, some extra time to focus on the blogging. And they don't have to be, even though they're very disparate, they don't have to be one or the other. Now, I think out of this, and I'm making it sound like you've got to work until you're 105, but out of this, you get the opportunity to do the screenplay as well. So it's bite-sized pieces, but begin with your spiritual work, because you're so much something that will help a lot of people. I hope that helps.
She also says, what about writing a cookbook with her mother-in-law, an Indian health cookbook?
Fantastic. I love the sound of that, and I think it's quite interesting because today, I'm going to share something with you now that I wouldn't normally share. I love Indian food, but I don't eat it. Because my partner, she doesn't like the smell of Indian food. And there's a reason for that. It's a past relationship. So, out of consideration, I tend not to eat it. But I love it. And today, I passed an Indian restaurant I'd never seen before. It was one of these fusion Indian restaurants. And what I love about Indian food is yes, there's a lot of ghee in Indian cooking, but it can be really healthy. To me, this is something that you can do alongside the blogging. So absolutely, and seeing as you've got a mother-in-law who's an expert, working with that mother-in-law and working it through, and remember the premise is to make it healthy, and because you're blogging, it can be very visual as well. So I think the blogging will lead to the book being there. And remember, do the readings, so work spiritually, and the blogging will take off as well. A bit slower, and then when you eventually get to the point where you're ready to go to a publisher and get everything published, it will come together. This may take you the best part of another 2 years, but don't let that put you off. Anything to do with writing is a slow process.
Great. Well, thank you very much for that. I'm sure she'll take that on board and consider all that you've advised. That's great.
I just want to say that I have got some feedback from the first reading you did for Liz, and she says, "Thank you very much. You were most helpful."
Well, that's very kind. So thank you, Liz, and thank you for passing that on.
Right. I also have another question from a young lady named Stella, whose birthday is the 4th of June, 2000. And she's, her mother is listening in, so she has permission. And she would like to know when would be a good time to begin her acting career, and if she should return to boarding school in England.
Oh, right. So it's a big, big question. So the first thing that strikes me, Stella, you've got a perfect name for somebody that's going to work in the performing arts. You're a Gemini, and Gemini is ruled by Mercury, and we know that Mercury is retrograde at the moment, and it will go retrograde several times a year. But it also goes direct, and it is the fastest moving planet because it's the closest to the Sun, and its relationship with the Sun, the Earth, the Moon, but more importantly Venus, because that's the planet that also is an inner planet. So as somebody who is ruled by Mercury, and by the way, the year that you were born in is a golden dragon, and golden dragons can do anything they want. So the good news here, Stella, is you will achieve all you set your sights on. However, because you're a Gemini, you've got this thirst for knowledge. And I'm just going to point something out. This is something that happens to singers and actors as they become older and older. They seem to have incredible wisdom. We think about all the great sort of actors that are sort of 60, 70 years of age and have this enormous wisdom. There's a reason for that. When you read out aloud, so you're remembering a song, or you're remembering lines, and you're speaking them or singing them, there's a lot going on with the mind, and it boosts the intellect, it boosts the IQ, it boosts the brain power. So the other part of it, should you go to boarding school here in the UK? So what I'm going to do, and I've not done this before because I've been sticking to the astrology, so I'm going to work with the cards, and I'll hold this up in front of the camera. It's amazing. It's the Three of Pentacles, and the Three of Pentacles, your energy, your numerologist happens to be 3. Gemini is the 3rd sign of the zodiac. The Three of Pentacles shows an artisan building a cathedral and being directed by the client and the bishop and the architect. So the symbology of this is being in a school that feels cloistered, and a lot of public schools in the UK are. It would be a great experience for you. And I think because I've got the Three of Pentacles there, it doesn't stop you pursuing the performing arts. It adds to the gravitas of your energy, so the way that people accept you and work with you. So absolutely, yes. I'm looking at a positive to both the things that you're asking. So it seems we'll watch out for you cropping up in the theatres and on the screens at some point, Stella.
The Golden Dragon, Stella the Golden Dragon, and she's she's a very talented girl. So that's amazing. Thank you so much. We'll
You're
wait for
welcome.
your feedback on that, Stella. And Megan says what you told her was she inspired her very much, and a huge thank you.
Oh, thank you very much. I'm only too pleased to do that.
Cool. So, right, Ted, are you still there? No? Ted?
There
Yes.
he is.
Oh, well, Ted, you must have a
Yeah.
question.
Well, I've got a question I'd like to ask for myself in a while, but there's somebody asking me what is on the wall behind you, Ray. It looks like a decorative gong from a temple, and they're intrigued.
There's an artist on the world that produces these works. This is the view from the keystone of Stonehenge, and the gold that looks like the gong is the sun rising between those points. So this is the summer solstice view from the keystone at Stonehenge. So that's the artist's interpretation of it. So it's actually 3 stones with a gold disc behind them representing the sun.
Oh, lovely. Okay, that should answer his question. Hopefully you can hear it. And there's one from my dear friend Jan, and I'm assuming she's asking for a reading, if that's okay. And she's giving her date of birth as the 9th of the 9th, 1947. Is that possible to do a reading for her? Tell her a little bit about herself. Thank you.
Yes, very much so. Thank you so much.
September 9th is really good. I like September 9th.
Oh, right. So, first of all, the energy of this is the way that we have a relationship of all these 9s. If you have a lot of 9s in your birthday, it makes you somebody that can empathize with everybody. Virgos naturally do that. Virgos have this ability to be very sensitive to other people's feelings. And the good news is, born in the Chinese year of the fire pig. So the fire pig is interesting because you're very much an earth sign, but the fire pig, and I'll explain it this way, in Chinese mythology, in Chinese spirituality, the pig is considered the most important of all the animals. It is the 12th sign of the Chinese zodiac, so it's the 12th year. And in a way, it's very similar to Pisces in that respect, insofar as it's the most spiritual. And they revere the pig very much so because the symbology that comes with it. Everybody knows about how the Chinese consider fish being very important because of the scales on the fish look like coins. So they're considered auspicious and very wealthy. But the pig has this ability to give so much to humanity, to mankind. And the good bit of news is, if you're born in the Chinese year of the pig, the older you get, the better life should become. And that's not necessarily just in a physical sense, it's in an emotional and in a spiritual sense as well. Now, let's see what else we've got going on for you. You have a numerology, which is extraordinary here, because you have a numerology of 3, which is in Gemini. And the 3 is ruled by Mercury. Virgo is ruled by Mercury, and well done to you, because Mercury is retrograde at the moment, and you managed to get your question in this evening, so well done to you for that, which means that you've reached a point in your life where a retrograde Mercury will not hinder or block you in any way. So what are the trends, what's unfolding for you as we go forward? Well, it's about the responsibilities that you've got for everybody else, and you've spent a lot of your life being, I'm going to use the metaphor of the Dutch boy that sort of stopped the dam from breaking. He paid attention, and that's what you've done all your life. You've paid attention to everybody else, and you've put the effort into everybody else. Your spiritual well-being is enormous, and you're somebody, because of the way your birthday is structured, who's a very old soul. And that soul energy in you means that you must have engaged in many, many lives, and this may well be what we call a nirvana life that you're going through at the moment. But I'm thrown back to, there's a song going through my head, and it's not one that I expected to hear, because I can hardly remember this, and it's Frank Ifield, A Tower of Strength. So it's as if that's what you've always been and what you've had to do. Now is the time that you can relax a little bit more and start getting the rewards. Now, you may have done some focusing on some cosmic ordering or some focusing on mindfulness and abundance. And I want to say that I'm getting pulled off in a different direction here. I don't know if you've given a golden ring to somebody, or there's a golden ring that's been handed down to you that you're going to pass on to somebody else. But the movement of that golden ring is very much about strong blessings where angels are concerned, and the energy of the Archangel Raphael, which is the angel that's associated to healing, lifting something off somebody's chest, taking something away from them, and that's all to do with the energy of the gift of the ring as well. I hope that's been some help.
Ray, thank you. I know Jan extremely well, and I know she will resonate with several things you said there, and I'll await her reply on social media as well. But the one interesting thing is, at the beginning, did you mention a fire pit?
Fire pig, sorry.
Fire pig. Okay.
The year of the fire pig. But that's intriguing, because are you telling me that she's done this fire walking?
It's that she has a very, very strong Native American connection. They live down in Kent, near to me on the marsh, but they very much live as best they can down here, the sort of American way. So I heard it as fire pit, which was very significant, but fire pig equally is good. And also, I don't know so much about the ring, and she'll no doubt come back to me on that, but as far as healing and the angelic connection, it is quite extraordinary, because this lady and I now sort of work together quite often, and there is an interconnection between the Native American and certainly the archangelic and angelic. So so far spot on, and you know, she'll come back to me in a moment on the other screen.
Something interesting. As you give that feedback, countries have astrological associations, and so, for instance, England is an Aries country, and France is a Leo country. America is a Gemini country, and her numerology of 3 is in Gemini, so she has this Mercury energy, and the sort of, so that's interesting that they try and live that sort of Native American lifestyle, which is very important. And it's, you know, of all the spiritualities and all the sort of modern ways of looking at things, I think because it's perhaps the most recent of living naturally or living with the earth, that it resonates with all of us so well. And I was looking up recently to go to Machu Picchu and Chichen Itza, and to see some of the indigenous Mayan people who sort of were the Native Americans that eventually got further and further south. And what's really interesting is that they live still incredibly simply and yet happy lives.
Yes, yes. It's so interesting, because earlier you mentioned Costa Rica.
Yes.
And as far as and you've also mentioned 2 other places that hold a sort of a strong interest to me, and my dear friend David Icke, who was very much influenced over in that part of the world. But Costa Rica being one of the happiest places on earth, and you know, the Gold Coast and whatever, yes, it's Costa Rica Rich Coast. And I literally only last night watched the last part of a Simon Reeve program about it. And as you said, they have no army, but they're the happiest people when they're playing football. They're sort of, you know, they just, you know, it's one place in the world that if you were going to end up, hey, head out that sort of way. Now, Jan's coming back to me, not surprisingly. Oh my God. Okay. She said, "Thank you, Ray. The song Tower of Strength."
Oh, right, yeah, I've forgotten about that, yes.
Oh my God, she said the song Tower of Strength is my son's song. And the ring is for my daughter from my mum. So, how spot on, how spot on could one ever be? Because I heard you, and I was going to say about her being a tower of strength for so many people herself, but actually being a song and being her son's song, hello, that's pretty cool. Thanks, Jan. I know she's listening. We're having trouble with the chat room, as I say, but I was passing on the message. Could I just pop back to that question previously just for a moment? The guy who asked about what is it on the wall behind you, he said he heard the answer, but it was actually the other thing on the wall he was inquiring about.
Yes. So just here, this one here.
Yes.
Yeah, that's a Mayan calendar.
Oh.
Gosh, I'm only just beginning to understand the Mayan zodiac. And it's much more complicated than Western zodiac, and it's because of they actually have this ability, the Mayans, to calculate better than we can even do with computers today. And they didn't have computers; they were able to do it. So, who were they taught by? Who gave them that information? And we all have the sort of equivalent in the Mayan zodiac. So perhaps on another occasion when I do this, I'll take the trouble to go through everybody's equivalents. But just as you said that about, you were asking about this on the wall, and it reminded me, of course, when you told me about Jan, who's a Virgo. The Native American zodiac for Virgo is the bear. So that's her Native American animal. She may choose other animals as well, but that's the one that is from the medicine wheel.
Oh, how perfect is that? Well, trust me, I know that the bear resonates very strongly with Jan and myself and another friend, big time. Absolutely big time. And she's also adding, coming back to Jan, the song Tower of Strength is her son's song, the son who looked after her when she broke her neck. That's a pretty serious sort of situation. And I'm blown away by that, the fact that you actually just said the words Tower of Strength, and it so resonates on a really deep level with the lady. So that's terrific. She says, indeed, thank you for that. While I'm on here, I don't want to sort of dominate too much. But I
haven't had a chance to speak to you much, and you've got a great beard, by the way.
Oh, thank you. Yeah, I just had issues, and a little bit mercury retrograde, and my laptop wouldn't sort it out. And that's what I was going to ask you, Ray, if you don't mind, and the ladies don't mind, could you just do a little reading for me?
Absolutely.
Based on whatever, yeah. It can be a numerology one, it can be a psychic one, it can be whatever you feel like.
If you don't mind sharing your birthday with everybody.
I don't mind, I'm very, very young still at heart. 21.
Yeah.
02 February 1962.
Lovely. And now that's an interesting one because you are a genuine cusp. And I'll talk about that a little bit. First of all, you may think of yourself as an Aquarian, but you're a Pisces.
Yep.
So we'll clear that up. However, we cannot take the Aquarian out of it. Physically, you're more like an Aquarian than a Pisces. Because Aquarians tend to have great presence, and they tend to always manage to work with communication very well, and of course, that's what you do so well. However, the other side of it is you're a very spiritual individual, and Pisces, the 12th sign of the zodiac, is the most spiritual sign of the zodiac. Now, I think I've written you down here somewhere, and I've lost your date of birth. When I look, you're the year of the tiger, and a water tiger. Now, what's interesting, when I look at the energy within your birthday, so that we have 6, 3, 5. The whole of your date of birth gives us a numerology of 5. So you're very much a Pisces on the cusp with Aquarius, but your numerology is in Leo. And that means you're very complex. There's a great deal going on. So we have water, fire, all mixed in. The tiger is a water tiger that's associated to you. So you tend to think of more of the Siberian rather than the Bengal tiger where you're concerned. So it's the white and black stripes rather than the gold and black stripes. Now, what's interesting is that's protective when you're a tiger. And do you know what time of day you were born?
I've got a sense it was about sort of 2 or 3 o'clock in the morning of the 21st.
Now that's interesting. You may have heard me talk earlier when I first started understanding astrology, and I looked at my own birth chart, and I was so disappointed because I recognised all the negatives in there. And one of the things the Chinese say about the tiger is if a tiger is born in the morning, the tiger's ferocious. If they're born in the afternoon, they're a pussycat. Now you seem a pussycat to me rather than ferocious. So perhaps you've learned to be a pussycat rather than ferocious. However, it may make you a defender looking at this Aquarius and Pisces and water tiger sort of defending, but the spiritual energy that's associated to you is enormously strong. And what's interesting is I've decided to cut the cards, and here I have the Eight of Pentacles. The Eight of Pentacles shows an artisan making a living. So the symbology of this, I'm afraid you've got a lot of work to do for many years. But that's good, because you make a difference and you fulfill a great deal as well. Now, I'll just, seeing as we've talked about this, I couldn't not come to your energy. As an Aquarian, you would be an otter. So that's part of the cusp. But you're really a Pisces, which is the wolf. So your Native American energy is the wolf. Interesting thing about otters. When otters sleep, they're like swans. They mate for life. And they link each other. Because they sleep on their backs, so belly up as they float in the water. But they're linked so that they don't drift apart in the night. So it's a symbology of loyalty that's associated to the otter that's in there as well. Now, coming back to the Eight of Pentacles, the pressures that you'll feel through October and November will be quite intense, but it's not pressures that you can't manage, it's just your responsibility that gives you the pressure. And it's sort of taking a breath, doing it, and trying not to overanalyze and overthink, and just letting the spirit move you, and you'll get where you're meant to be, which isn't just your journey, it's several other people's journeys as well. And again, because of the other things within your birthday, if we think about the sort of healing energy, I'm going to move away from the traditional 4 archangels that we would think about with you, though the Archangel Michael is very much a big part of you. But working with the choirs of angels, or the corps of angels, it is the energy of the seraphim that is very important where you're concerned. So again, even though we see you with all this water influence, and yet it's the fire of the seraphim that gives you the power of your abilities. I hope that's some help.
Oh, some help and some. Whoa. Okay. So spot on in absolutely every area. I so resonate particularly with the Siberian tiger. In a rather bizarre way, I actually have an eBay identity, which is Tiger Siberian. All right, so that's one real kick there. October, November, you are absolutely spot on that there will be any number of us doing, as we have been all year, but particularly in October and November, travel to India and places, more than one of us, and quite intense sort of work. And then, of course, the absolute clincher there when you come to the angelic realm and Archangel Michael in particular, because it is not just the single angel of Archangel Michael that is most resonant, but it is also the choir of the multitude that I draw on. And as you spoke, I mean, this is really extraordinary, and you'll know what I mean, and probably most people listening will know the energy that actually flooded down as you were speaking of the angels just hit me, you know, just absolutely wafted over me. So Ray, yeah, you're a star, and you're spot on, and your connectivity is absolutely mind-blowing. So yeah, and you don't know me, for the benefit of everybody else. I've only just engaged with this guy tonight, and he knows little or nothing about me. So yeah, thank you, bless you. That's awesome.
You're more than welcome.
While we're here, I've got one more question, if I may, Nina, just from a friend, the one who was asking curiously about the Mayan calendar and the Stonehenge figurines, which I rather like as well. His date of birth, if we could, if you don't mind, Ray, could we do one more for me? Yeah, thank you. He's a young man, annoyingly. The 5th, 0503, 1989.
Okay, thank you. And let's see what we've got in here. So we have 8, 9, numerology of 8. So a Pisces water sign, numerology of 8 linked to Scorpio. That's really quite powerful. And it draws with it so many spiritual energies on quite an important level as well. And 89 is the year of the snake. And that's interesting because we've spoken to, or sort of done readings for a couple of snakes this evening as well. But I'll just check which element is associated to that snake. Oh, the element of earth. So here we have a water energy, very much beautiful sort of healing qualities, but connected to the earth very deeply. So this is interesting because you have real grounding, but it's almost like there's a light going from this individual down into the core of the earth, but also out into the universe as well. So this is something that's got a great deal to do in life, and maybe hasn't had the easiest start, but has the ability to have great wisdom on quite sort of young shoulders, for want of a better expression. And I know when you're 26, you don't think you're young. You think of yourself as getting on, but the energy in here is very beautiful. What I want to also sort of bring into this is a little bit about how when somebody is a Pisces that has a numerology of 9, they have to pay attention to Jupiter. And Jupiter just happens to be transiting through the constellation of Virgo, which is opposite to Pisces at the moment, which is a great counterbalance. And sometimes Pisces people have a lot of challenges, so it's difficult to smile, it's difficult to laugh. But here we have somebody that can always use laughter to make other people's pains disappear. So I'm not suggesting that you should become a stand-up comedian, but the energy of laughter is the big thing that comes through. I hope that was some help.
I'll see if he comes back with some swift feedback there. From what I know, the guy, yeah, pretty spot on. And actually, just before this program came on air, we were sat out in the garden. We've had a fairly decent event today, and we were looking up at the stars, myself and Richard and his girlfriend. And I swear to goodness, to all the listeners, yourself, Ray, Nina, and Era, we were talking about shooting stars, and he looked up, and then he said to his girlfriend, that could be a shooting star. And as we watched it, I've never seen anything like it. It wasn't a plane. It was the fastest moving white light that I've ever seen traverse the sky, twice, 3 times the speed of an aircraft. It never actually fully took form with the comet trail type of thing behind it.
Right.
But it was just rather spooky that this happened at that moment. It was like synchronicity at its best. And Richard is not essentially spiritual per se. I mean, we're all spiritual whether we know it or not, but he's not per se, but there is a depth of wisdom, and he's half my age, I've just realised. He's half my age. But he's certainly got something, and I've always felt a connection with this lad who's got a wisdom beyond his years.
Yeah.
And he will probably step into some sort of work like that. And yes, you know, whilst I'll say he's not a stand-up comedian, thinks he's a bit smart and funny, but he's also, you know, no, he is good company and a happy young man, and very wise beyond his years, which he's probably never heard me say before. So yeah, appreciate that, Ray. He hasn't given me any feedback yet on social media, but thanks so much for that, because I know it absolutely is spot on.
Thank you.
So, Era or Nina, thank you for my opportunity.
Well,
had longer.
Would always like to give you your opportunity, Ted. You're worth it. But Ray, first of all, I want to say you're such an amazing reader, and to all the people who have had the pleasure of receiving your wisdom tonight, a huge thank you and appreciation. An appreciation from us here for you time to share with us, and to all the people who will be viewing this archive recording, and which they can access right after the show. And, you know, we would invite people who want to have readings from Ray to just make a note of his website, which is right under Ray Castro, under his face there, www.raymondcastrogiovanni@yahoo.co.uk. And Ray's in business. He would love to give you a reading, and I'm sure how the details of how you can reach this fantastic guy are very clear on his website, correct?
Absolutely. I have realised I've done my email address instead of my website, so I do apologise.
Well,
I put my email address in there.
Well, even easier. You get to email him, and he will tell you to write you his terms and conditions, right?
I will correct that for you. I'll put that in and correct the correct. I'm a silly man. See, Mercury retrograde.
It's all affected us completely.
And it wasn't until you read it back to me that I realised what I'd done.
And Stella says thank you. She's so pleased it matches her instincts as she learns so much better in the UK. So you've had amazing feedback tonight, as I knew that you would. And you've been a fantastic guest. I want to thank you for taking the time to spend with us this evening, and we really would love to have you back.
Oh, it would be a pleasure. Thank you so much.
I hope you've enjoyed yourself too.
Yeah, it's been lovely meeting you all. I mean, obviously I know you, Nina, but so nice to meet your colleagues as well. And I mean, lovely people. I've had a great time tonight.
I've got feedback from Richard, who says, couldn't say that Ray said anything wrong, so a thumbs up from me. Good. In general, Jan says, please say good night to all for me. From my point of view, before I hand to Era for fully wrapping up, yeah, we have some guests on this show. And from a personal point of view, Ray, I didn't get to connect with you throughout, but I tell you what, and I don't want to make your head big or whatever, although I might. I don't think I've encountered such a beautiful, lovely soul with such awesome energy that I get from you from the moment you appeared on the screen when I finally got on here. Your insight and your reading for me was astonishing. I know it was for Jan, and I know it was for Richard in that sense. But yeah, it's been a genuine, sincere pleasure to engage with you tonight. Would that it could have been longer, but thank you. Truly great.
No, that's very, very kind of you, and I appreciate it. I'm very bad at accepting compliments, but I will take it. Thank you so much.
Great stuff.
Yeah, thank you so much, Ray. It has been an extraordinary 2 hours, believe it or not. 2 hours just went by so quickly.
Incredible, yes.
I know.
I can't believe it.
But you know, that's a sign of having fun, right?
It is indeed.
So thank you so much for your time and your expertise. I know our viewers have benefited, and certainly I want to encourage everyone to visit your website, to seek out your services, because if today's demonstration is any example, it's phenomenal. You do phenomenal work. And thank you so much for sharing it with us today.
Thank you very much, Ara. It's been a pleasure.
And I can't wait for your return visit. So
I look forward to it.
Yeah, it's going to be great. Now, next week, so the viewers know, we have Glenda Pearson, who is a grief specialist or a bereavement specialist, and she's also a medium. So you never know what's going to happen on next week's show. Hopefully you will tune in, and until then, we bid you goodbye.
Night.
Nina's got her mic muted. Yeah, you do. Oh, well, okay. Bye, everyone. See you next week.